All right, it is 7:07. I will call the January 10th, 2022 Selectmen's meeting to order. I'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Start with any amendments to the agenda. Pending approval. I don't have anything. Anyone else? Nothing. All right. Moving on to 4.1 and 4.2. I think we were all present.
Nope, I wasn't.
You weren't. Okay.
Second one.
So 4.1. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of 4.1 of December 13th?
So move.
Moved by Rob. Do I have a second? Seconded by Tor. Any discussion on those minutes?
Fine.
All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes? All right, passes 5-0. Move on to 4.2, the minutes from December 28th. Do I have a motion on that?
So move.
Moved by Rob. Do I have a second?
I'll second
Seconded by
that.
Tor. Any discussion on that? Those minutes? All right. All right, all those in favor? All right, passes 4 with 1 abstention. All right, moving on to public comments for items not on the agenda. The board requests public comments are limited to 5 minutes per subject. Do I have any public comments? All right, I just had one quick thing. A couple days before New Year's, we lost Ken Vinyl, who was he was acting as our code enforcement officer, and he's been working with the town as long as I've been on the board. So we've been through a lot of different changes together, and he's always been a great resource, whether it's code enforcement or going through the planning process with our new land use ordinance. He was involved in that, and had a lot of commentary and helpful things that he brought to, and he was a good friend in the office, and we're really going to miss him. So it's with great sadness that we lost our Ken Vinyl. So
Thank you for saying that.
yeah. So, all right. Moving on, I didn't get anything for future select board agenda items. So moving on to new business, 7.1, Lincoln County Hazard Mitigation Plan update. And I've already forgotten your name. I'm sorry. Sandy. Sandy, would you like to come up and tell us a little bit? Yep, right at the hot seat.
Kind of interrogation or something.
Yeah.
So thank you all for letting me come and talk tonight. Like I said, my name's Sandy Gilbreth. I'm at the Lincoln County Planning Commission. If you're not familiar with the commission, we are a department of Lincoln County government, and we provide services to all the municipalities in Lincoln County on things like land use, economic development, planning services, environmental projects, things like that. We do have a whole host of different things services we provide for the town, different towns. Over the past year and a half, we've been working on the Lincoln County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Typically, this is something that's done in the emergency management realm. And because it was in a plan of sorts, and our emergency management agency asked us to do it, we undertook every 5-year update of the hazard mitigation plan. It's countywide. Every county in Maine does one. I don't want to say every county in the country does one, because some larger cities like, LA, they'll do their own, but mostly it's a county-based a plan that FEMA requires if you want to apply for certain funding sources. So what the plan does is it does a really extensive risk assessment of natural hazards that affect the jurisdiction. So in Lincoln County, those natural hazards were things like flooding, summer storms, winter storms, wildfire, and drought. And this year we had the pleasure of adding pandemic to that those natural hazards. You look at the risk of all of those things, look at previous storms and the cost of what those storms cost and damage, the likelihood they'll happen again, forecasts for all of that. There's a whole big risk assessment process. And then from that, you go town to town and ask them about what would be the areas that would be vulnerable to the different natural disasters mentioned in the plan, and then what would be some potential projects that would mitigate the negative impacts of those natural disasters. So for Newcastle, who provided some input? I know Mal provided a little bit as public comment and
Seth Hager.
Seth. Okay, Seth Hager.
Road
Thank you.
commissioner.
I don't have the plan in front of me. I think someone said your agenda item packet was probably like 500 pages, and it was probably. I thought of that. I was like, oh, that was probably the hazard mitigation plan. So I don't tote it around with me a lot, but I usually have it on my computer. So there was input that was given from, I think Seth was probably your emergency management person there, and road commissioner. Okay, great. And I reached out to all those towns, so it's hard. Everyone gets like jumbled in my head who belongs to who. And the public, we did a couple different public comment periods to get input on that. And what I'm looking for tonight, so the plan is done. It's been approved by FEMA for a little while, and now we have the full approval status. But when we first reached out to come to the meeting tonight, it was in approval pending adoption status. So for the plan to become fully active, the towns need to adopt it. And what that means, it doesn't obligate the town to do anything. So I think you should have a copy of the resolution. That this is a resolution that will say that you adopt the plan. It means that you are now officially like incorporated into the plan, and you'll be eligible for those FEMA funding streams should you want to go for them in the future. It's updated for 5 years, and then the plan will go through that same process again in 5 years. But there's hazard mitigation funds. There's the BRIC program. I believe it's building resilience in communities. So there are things that would potentially rebuild like culverts and road infrastructure, reinforced buildings, seawalls, things that would prevent against, extreme flooding and storm winds and all those kinds of things. So there's all kinds of different projects that can qualify. I know I'm saying a lot, but I just wanted to get it all out and then you can ask questions. There's a lot of projects that can qualify, and you can amend the plan. So if there's something that's not in the plan for Newcastle and you want to add that, you can make a formal change to the plan and amend it, and then put that project in there so you can use that to qualify for future funding. So I'm asking tonight is for the select board to adopt the hazard mitigation plan.
Why don't I then start with the motion, then we can move into discussion and maybe ask some more questions.
Absolutely.
So do I have a motion to accept the Lincoln County Hazard Mitigation Plan as
Sure.
presented?
Mhm.
Moved by Karen, do I have a
Second.
second? Seconded by Rob. All right, anyone have any questions or comments? I didn't read the entire thing. I have to
That
admit.
is- Okay.
Sorry about that, but I did look through it.
Yeah, I flipped through quite a bit. It seemed like some towns had more detail in there than others. So,
That's right.
but it was interesting that you said, so if there was something that we felt was important that might be something we would be looking for funding for, we'd want to do an adjustment to the plan,
That's
get
right.
that detail in there. And then, so basically the main function of the plan is as a prerequisite for funding for getting FEMA funding for projects.
Right. I think FEMA would probably say that the point of the plan is to assess your town, look at potential hazards, think about how you might want to address them, who's responsible for that, what kind of funding you need, all of that. But they do, like you said, it is a prerequisite to be eligible for those funds. But it is a good exercise for towns to go through to really do a thorough assessment, look at all the areas that would be vulnerable, what kind of projects, how much money does that need, who's responsible for that. So that's the idea of the exercise, and then learning about those risks so that you can take other steps, because it doesn't have to be FEMA funds, or because all kinds of different funds that can support those projects. But the project does have to be named in the plan for it to be eligible.
So when you say projects named, the only place I recall seeing actual projects were, there was a list of some road projects that our road commissioner put in there.
Mhm.
Is that the only spot where there would be,
That's correct. Yep.
okay, and a number of those are completed already. So I don't know if
Right.
there's other stuff that we want. This is all before I was involved
Sure.
with the board, so I'm not
Sure.
familiar with how.
So I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. There's two different tables, And there's a requirement for the plan that you update the projects that were named in the last iteration of the plan.
Okay.
So that might be what you're looking at.
Yeah.
They're right next to each other, so it can be a little, you kind of have to like read the fine print of like, this one's the updated table, and then the table below it would be the new projects. And then there is a status for them of like, they're pending approval, or, deferred needs funding, things like that. So there's two tables for Newcastle. Every town provided updates from the last plan, and then a table with new projects.
Does
And I
anybody-
also saw under the different hazards, there were, in some places, it broke out hazards by town.
Right, but not projects to address them.
Right.
Right.
That's a separate.
Yeah, I was
listing,
looking for what do we do
Right.
in this? And I didn't see, other than some road projects. I don't know who else would have given input from the town.
I think it was just Seth. I do know that Mal, through the public comment period, added some thoughts. But I think that was it for Newcastle. So if you look, it's towards the end of the plan, you'll see all those tables. That's the projects for Newcastle.
Yep.
There are some discussions throughout the rest of the plan, things that were like areas that might have been vulnerable. Those
Yes.
might have been, named out. And then there's also a section for potential countywide projects that would be for the same thing, for drought, flooding, summer storm, winter storms, things like that.
There's a lot of information in here.
Yeah.
And because of it, I had trouble finding out what is the actual plan that's saying it. There seems to be a list of projects. But it didn't seem anywhere that there was a real finite plan.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not built, it's not like a plan like step one, this is what we do. Step two,
Right.
it just really talks about like the hazard mitigation, or like the hazard landscape of that jurisdiction. So there's things like other organizations that you would work with, or other ways that you could help implement the plan. So we talked about comprehensive plans for towns, trying to use those as a way to get hazard mitigation projects move forward. There's other agencies that are named as potential partners, in areas that might, like, if you have a watershed that crosses two counties, things like that. So it really just talks about like the whole landscape of everything that would go into it. And I don't have all of those specific sections, committed to memory yet, but which is surprising for the amount of time we've spent on this plan. But as you look through, it really just talks about like all of the things that would be needed to like push forward hazard mitigation to make your town the most resilient that it could be. So it's not a traditional plan. And like I said, in that it lists steps, but it talks about the whole landscape.
That helps clarify, because I was looking for those steps.
Right.
Does it make a difference if some towns approve it and others don't? It's still the county plan. And to get the FEMA funds and such, we need to adopt that. Is that correct?
Well, so like what I said, it was initially in that approval pending adoption phase. So that you needed at least like, I think it was just one, but they wanted you to have a couple of towns that formally approved it before they would give you the full approval. And then it's recommended 1 year that you get all the towns to approve. So now that I think the two towns were Damerscott and Southport did it first. So then we were able to say, great, we got at least 2 towns. They moved it forward. We got our formal approval letter. And then now for like Newcastle, for example, even though it's approved for Lincoln County, you would still need to adopt it for your town to qualify for the funds.
I had one little question of something that I noticed. There was $6,000 allocated for educational programs through social media and other things like that.
Mhm.
And then as I was reading, it looked as though we're asking the towns to do some of these kinds of things and report back. Did I read that wrong?
Might have been slightly misread. So
Okay.
the $6,000 was not an allocation. It just was a named cost, that if that task was going to be done, this was roughly the amount of money that it would cost.
Okay.
And that's the same thing that all the towns did in their project list. So you'll see for Newcastle too, there's usually some cost that's associated with it. Not that you're going to get that money. It's just saying that if we went through this culvert widening project, then this is how much we think it would cost. So on that section for countywide projects, the $6,000 was for if we did that educational safety campaign for flooding, this is how much we think it would cost.
But is that something that comes out of the county, or is that something that the towns are being asked to do?
It's just the name cost of the project. So that funding could come from these hazard mitigation funds, or like for that FEMA provide through BRIC or through hazard mitigation. It could come from anywhere. They could apply for another grant somewhere else. There's no funding associated with that, with the hazard mitigation plan. It's just the name potential cost if this was.
Right. No, I wasn't really worried about the money part. I just wanted to know if that educational component was something that
Oh,
the
I see.
county hoped to do itself, or that they were hoping that the towns would do?
In that where that educational one is, that would be, it was for county projects. So that would
Okay.
be something. And I think in that, there should be an associated responsible party for that. Usually it goes like what the project is, responsible party, status, timeline, cost. So there should, I think it says, Lincoln County Emergency Management.
Okay.
For that one. Yeah, sorry, misunderstood the question.
Yep, no problem. I'm probably fried from trying to read it.
It is a lot, yes. And I'm actually, not having it in front of me, I feel like I have committed a lot of it to memory. This is a good test.
This is good.
Besides page numbers, but everything else.
Actually, again, this is kind of maybe unfair to ask, but there's a map of each town that shows, among other things, hurricane evacuation
Mhm.
zones with an A, B, and C grading.
Okay.
And it's like the whole river along, well, both rivers in Newcastle, and like a quarter of Newcastle on the Sheepshead River is all in the hurricane evacuation zone A. What does that mean?
So that would be a question for my colleague. She did the risk assessment. I did more of the plan and the connection with towns and the mitigation strategies and the outreach. So she did that risk assessment part. I couldn't tell you
Okay.
where that came from. Yeah, but she's part of the Lincoln County Planning Commission. I can give you her email address, and she would love to explain that.
Thank you.
No.
Any other questions?
Can you, this is the one clunky thing.
Yeah.
Maybe one more mic.
Given the town's uncertain liability that might obtain in the area of the causeway, does there need to be some carefully worded comment in the amended plan that would give us some protection if we should end up being the ones holding the sack?
Consideration.
Um,
Yeah.
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 And this update is different than previous updates when it comes to projects in that you can do like projects for engineering and scoping costs. Previously, those weren't allowable. It was just like shovel-ready projects. So if there was, I'm not sure what the Causeway project is, but those things can count as line items for things that you can get funding for. And the more projects that are in there, the better it is for MEMA, the Maine Emergency Management Agency. There's new software now where they look at all these projects and they code them and they put them in a big database. And so then as other funding sources come up and whether it's in FEMA or other federal departments, they can quickly see when funding is coming up and they can reach out and say, hey, everyone that has this specific culvert type project, let's let them know that this specific culvert funding is coming out. So the more information that's in the plan, the more useful it is and the more they can connect you with funding.
Which makes me wonder, is there anyone other than Seth that should be thinking about projects? I don't know. Other projects that are not road related that we want in there.
Right. A lot of folks that give input are road commissioners, public works and public safety, but also emergency management directors. So I can't remember the name of the person. Is it Kaler? No.
Jim Kaler. Jimmy, yeah.
It might be your emergency management director.
Mhm.
And so that would be someone that could give input. There's all kinds of different, I mean, anyone can give, suggestions for projects for anything that would, and they don't have to be just physical infrastructure. They can be things like education and outreach and stuff like that. So they could be all different kinds of things.
But if we pass this and then think of a project in the future, we can send projects to you and amend it.
That's right.
in the
Yep.
future.
Yep. And then it would really only, I mean, it's good to have that information for that funding, like I said, but it's only like super necessary when there is funding for FEMA that you want to apply for that project, because it has to be named in the plan. So if you know that there's something, the brick funding is coming up, I think again, maybe in September, and there's something you want to do, you want to make sure that project is in the plan ahead of time.
Would amendments have to wait till you get full approval from the various Lincoln County towns?
Nope.
You can amend as you.
Yeah, because we're active now, because the Damerscott and Southport pushed us through, so now we're final and it's active.
The only other project that just popped in my head was the fish ladder
Mhm.
it's in Noblesboro, but it's a joint effort between Newcastle and Noblesboro. And that's a piece of infrastructure that is required because of the dam up on the,
Mhm.
we need a fish passage ladder, and it's been the towns that have managed that. Just one thing to think about.
As long as it is something that would mitigate like flooding risk or storm risk or something. I don't know exactly the full function of that, but if it would help, if it would be something that would help mitigate against flooding, then that would
I think it
be
could, yeah.
applicable.
I mean, it's a bunch of blocks of water with a bypass.
Possibly.
Anyway. All right. Any other discussion? Questions? Thank you very much
Thank you,
for
Sandy.
Thank
for
you,
coming
Sandy.
in and
Absolutely, yeah.
explaining it.
And we're happy to answer any other questions at a later date. Do
Um,
you have a?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yep, so we'll pass that around at the end of the
great.
meeting and I'll get you a signed copy.
Great, yeah, either hard copy, mailed or a scanned copy.
Perfect.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cindy.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
So we have a motion and
Yep.
a second. Are we looking
So-
for a vote?
We are, yep. So all those in favor of approving the Lincoln County Hazard Mitigation Plan as presented and discussed? All right, passes 5-0. Great. Moving on to 7.2, establish voting date and method for fire protection ordinance by citizens petition. So I'm just gonna back up
Thank you.
here.
Have a good night.
Go through a little bit. I don't have the date in front of me as to when we received the petition. But basically in November, we received a citizens petition for a fire protection ordinance. And I was just going to go over again. I went over this at the meeting where we discussed it first. I'm just going to go over how this works, just to clarify and set the tone for what we're working on next. So, so basically, when the board receives a petition, place an article on the warrant, it should follow these steps. Verify that a sufficient number. Oh wait, I wanted to go back here. See, Title 30A MRSA 2522 says that on a written petition signed by a number of voters equal to at least 10% of the votes cast in the town in the last gubernatorial election, but in no case less than 10%, than 10, the municipal officers shall insert the petitioned article in the next warrant issued or within 60 days, call a special town meeting for that article's consideration. And so that's what we're discussing tonight. And I'm just going to go over again what the steps the board takes when we follow when we get a petition such as this. When the board receives a petition to place an article on the warrant, it should follow these steps. Verify that a sufficient number of registered voters have signed it. This is usually done by the town clerk working with the registrar of voters, as the petition is usually filed with the clerk initially. That part has been done. Michelle verified the signatures. And so that part is taken care of. Review the proposed article, which should appear in or attach to the petition to determine whether it asks an unambiguous question and calls for the action the town can legally take. If the petition is ambiguous or poorly worded, notify the circulators of the petition that there is a problem with the proposed article. The circulators can redraft the article and commence the petition process again, or take the risk that the ambiguous article may not be valid if adopted. The board may put its own competing article in the warrant, which is not ambiguous. If the petition calls for an illegal act, such as using town equipment to plow private roads, then you can refuse to put it on the warrant since it will not be effective even if adopted. So right now, we have been reviewing the ordinance, but it's going to take some additional time to review all portions of it to verify that those last two sections that I read, if the petition is ambiguous or poorly worded, or if the petition calls for an illegal act. So do have legal counsel here if there are any questions specific to that. But that is something that is pending and continue and ongoing. So where we have 60 days from when presented, when the votes were verified, that puts us basically till, I think we have 2 days to, we'd have 2 days to set the meeting. So I just wanted to, we have to basically set a meeting time and method to discuss this. So to vote on this. So I've talked to everyone individually. Sarah's talked to everyone individually. The general consensus that I heard from people was the 14th of setting a date for the 14th of June, which would be the ballot portion of our annual town meeting. I think that some of the considerations that the town looked at when we were discussing this was the fact that we are still in a pandemic. We're not sure exactly what reality is going to look like in June, whether we'll have an annual town meeting in person or not. And also the idea is that this is a very large change in how, especially the funding and employment end of fire protection in the town is currently taken care of and dealt with. So allowing the majority of the town to vote on it was part of it. So I guess what I'm looking for right now is I'm looking to see if someone will make a motion to put the citizens initiative on the June 14th ballot. Moved by Tor. Do I have a second? All right, seconded by Rob. So is there any further discussion on this from the board?
I would say I think this is the most reasonable approach. We want to have the maximum participation in a decision like this. And since we need to set a date now, I think that's the most reasonable, and review is ongoing. So I think that's our best way to move forward.
In that regard, would there be public hearings on the ordinance?
So
And does that allow the optimal time for the number of hearings we need?
So I got something from Michelle earlier today. Basically, we would be required to have a public hearing at least 10 days before the June 14th vote. So at least 10 days before. We're only required to have this one, but the town can hold as many hearings as they want. Hearings are usually held before a Board of Selectmen meeting, but can be held at any time.
And
So-
the hearings will not result in any amendment to the ordinance because the ordinance has to be voted on as is.
Correct. Where it's a citizens petition at this point, the only way it can be, well, it does say, and Peter, you might have to help me on this. The article I just read from MMA says if the petition is ambiguous or poorly worded, notify the circulators of the petition there is a problem with the proposed article. Circulators can redraft the article and commence the petition process again. So in that case, who would be notified and how could it be?
So the petition should have identified the circulators.
Yeah.
You would notify all of the circulators. I think there were 3 on this one.
Okay. And so all 3 circulators would have to,
Correct. All 3 would get notice.
okay,
And that doesn't mean, by the way, that, if we determine there's an issue, that doesn't mean it goes on the June ballot, whatever they send in again. That would get set to whenever you guys want to have that
correct. And the
same
process,
issue.
and the process would have to start.
Yeah,
over
process
again as
starts all
far as
over
the-
again.
As far as collecting signatures and.
Yep,
and-
exactly right.
So at the public hearings, nothing could change on the.
You can't change the wording of the petition at the hearings.
Okay,
Like, when the planning board may propose something new, you have a public hearing, planning board says, let's make these changes based on the hearing. It can't happen with a petition. Petition, it's set in stone.
But could the circulators pull it back saying, based on what they heard at a public hearing, it doesn't convey what they thought it would convey? And they-
No, I think your problem is the way the statute lays it out. Once it's submitted with the right number of signatures, it's got to go to town meeting.
okay. And then, I guess if you can speak to the difference between a petition being ambiguous or poorly worded and an illegal act.
Sure. So an illegal act would be something that is clear, but clearly wrong.
Yeah.
Versus an ambiguous petition. My favorite is and you see this quite frequently, right? When you have a warrant article, it says something like, shall the town raise and appropriate $100,000 for a municipal skate park in downtown Damerscott, right? That's proper wording, right? And that's a legal purpose. But if you say, shall the town direct that $100,000 be used to plow Peter Drum's driveway in Bristol, that's not allowed, right? Or upgrade the driveway. I think they should upgrade the driveway, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's legal. So that's a clear purpose, but it's illegal. Okay.
I see.
But you can also have warrant articles that will say things like, to ask the town to consider if it will build a skate park. So if you sign the petition, you're asking the town a question that would be worded, shall the town consider
I see.
whether or not to have a skate park? It's actually an ambiguous question, because it's not saying, shall the town do it? It's saying, shall we consider it?
Yeah.
And so anything that is ambiguous about what the final outcome of that petition being voted creates an ambiguous question. Another one would be, shall the town, this is one I dealt with about 10 years ago, shall the town discontinue the public launch? Well, there were 3 public launches, right?
see.
So what is it asking? And they said, oh, well, we meant this one. And it's, just go out and get new signatures because, and also, as a town attorney, I've always offered to look over petitioners' wording and that sort of stuff, because I feel it's like our duty to effectively help them make it effective, at least. But I think I'm fairly certain I offered that in this case, and they didn't want to do that. And so we are in review now.
Yep.
We're going through with a fine tooth comb. We'll come back to you soon with an opinion.
Thank you very much. I just, for myself, the clarification between ambiguous
Sure,
and that was just the one I just wanted to, just for my own knowledge.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
It can be legal potentially, but ambiguous,
Yeah.
or it
Right.
can be clear
sense,
but
yeah.
illegal. And in either of those cases, you can, say no, we're not gonna have it.
Is the review always done beforehand, or is there a vote sometimes and
Well-
something that passed is rescinded because of illegality?
Yeah, no, that does happen. There are cases, especially where if a town hasn't legally reviewed it, or if the town attorney thinks it may be open to challenge, but is not necessarily illegal, it's a close call. Then sometimes those will go ahead and go through, and then you see if anybody challenges it, or if even the town can sometimes, talk about a make work program for your town attorney, you pass the article and then you have your town attorney challenge it.
Right.
But that does happen sometimes. Especially in bigger towns or cities where they have more contentious issues that could happen.
So are there any more, is there any more discussion over citizens initiative? All right, so is the motion clear enough to be on the June 14th?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
All right.
be on the June 14th.
All those in favor? All right, passes 5-0. And I would just say that at a previous meeting, we did also discuss, the board brought forth the concept of a municipal, forming a municipal fire department ordinance. And we have been in discussion with a small group from the small group of the select board has been in some discussion with members of the fire company to go through it differently line by line and try and understand the nuances of it and clarify different things and hopefully come up with something that works for everybody. So that is also currently ongoing. So I'll mention that as well. Yep. All right. Moving on to 7.3. New. We are going to be going over the remote meeting policy.
Oh, yeah, I'll stick
So
around.
why don't you stick around for that? So 7.3, New Hope for Women, which the name is changed to
It is changed to New Hope Mid-Coast.
New Hope
So we'll-
Mid-Coast.
We'll change that for our records.
Request for $330. And what this is there was a, maybe I'll just turn it over to you.
Yeah,
So I don't
sure.
repeat it wrong.
So historically, New Hope Mid-Coast had requested a budget allocation from the town of Newcastle for $830. They made a mistake in their budget request this year. So the budget that was approved only approved a dollar amount of 500. So they've reached out and said, look, we made a mistake. Is there any chance you can update our request to what we historically have been approved for with 830? So hoping to have that discussion.
But typically, these type of requests are presented at the town meeting and
Yes.
approved by the town
Yeah.
body.
Similar to the process for the library or any of the other nonprofit organizations that the town makes annual budget allotments for.
And do we have a policy for the one-offs or something similar to this coming to the board?
We don't. The only thing I was thinking about, I was sort of discussing this a little bit and talking to Sarah earlier today about this. And I know that some of the agencies that we support, they actually have a metric that they use for the requests they have for different towns. For instance, the library has one. And I think Mid-Coast Conservancy actually has some sort of a metric that they use that's, I don't know if it's just based on population or, what it is, but I think it's not just an erroneous number and it's not just $500 from every town. It's there's the number is based on something. And I think the one clarification I would like, and then some go up and down based on the need. So the one clarification that I would maybe like to see is if there is some sort of a metric that is applied to other towns, and it was just simply a clerical error of, I think it's not, I don't have an issue with supporting the full amount. What?
Just FYI, in 2017, 18, 19, 20, and 21, they requested $830, and that's what we
Yeah,
awarded.
yeah.
So
So I don't have an issue with, I'm just,
Yeah.
like I said,
I
I
agree. Yeah.
I think it's,
Just, I was wondering if it was an increase over what they'd asked for in the past, so people might not
No.
have voted for it if it was double what they had
Yeah.
asked for in the past, but it's exactly what they've been getting for the last, 6 years? So,
But to get an answer to that question, we would need to ask someone from New
Yeah.
Hope Conservancy New Hope Mid-Coast to come in and explain.
or at least just provide the supporting information. But I don't have a problem with it. I just don't know exactly where we pull it from the budget.
That was my question, is where would we
It would, I wouldn't necessarily request taking it out of a different line. I would say that we would just overspend in that line. The 330, and then the difference would end up coming out of the general fund,
At the end of the year.
Yeah. rather than misallocating into a line that it's not.
Sure.
Or wouldn't necessarily, it would come out of, the general fund in the sense that it would, any monies that weren't spent that then roll into the general fund.
Right. Well, and we were pretty conservative with estimating revenues and things like that, but I don't know where we are, but I suspect.
We're, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're doing.
So I suspect if we don't have a policy about the nonprofits coming to seek additional funds, does this start a policy or a precedent, if you will, for other groups to come and request additional money off budget?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I
And
mean, I
I,
think-
I think there is a difference where it was it is a clear misunderstanding. So,
I think it's a fairly narrow precedent.
If,
But
if
you're
people
right.
look at purpose, I guess, yeah,
Right.
or reason behind it.
Right.
Or are they just looking, here's an opportunity to come back and ask for more. money.
right. And then
I think they'll get a different mess pretty quick if that starts happening.
in the case of copier paper, just to compare it to copier paper, if John Duke put in a line for copier paper and forgot to really actually ask someone how much copier paper we go through, and we overspent on the copier paper, it would be a similar thing, but different.
Well, definitely different as one's a nonprofit
And one is, co-
organization,
and one
one's
is,
running the government.
and one is
a-
copier paper.
Right. so,
Why, it was a terrible analogy. But
I know, it's a definitely, I mean, in the scheme of things, not a lot of funds, but just looking at, what it could do
Yeah.
for the future.
So I would just say at this point, why don't I just make a motion, see if we have someone that makes a motion to provide New Hope Midcoast with the additional $330 that was accidentally left off the request. Do I have a motion? Moved by Karen. Do I have a second? Seconded by Rob. Is there any other? further
Another
dis-
question is that when it's voted at these nonprofit requests at town meeting, are they all together or they're singly?
So, and this is the other interesting thing is that usually so when we have our annual town meeting, we go through the budget line by line. And sometimes there are discussions on certain allocations. But for the past 2 years, because of the pandemic, things have been lumped together and we've been casting our, people have been casting their votes on the broader spectrum, the broader categories. That being said, in the town report, that breakdown is still there. Yeah, is still there. That shows everything. So, again, it's one of these, nuances. I
We
guess.
won't have to vote in lumps this coming June.
Yeah.
But that just tells me probably wasn't an opportunity for somebody to speak up to say, oops, our number is incorrect.
Yeah.
But then on the other end, it says that the town allocated a certain set of
Yeah.
money for all of the groups and they don't want to go over it.
Anyway.
Do we know what New Hope Midcoast does in Newcastle at all, or how does it help Newcastle?
They provide services for persons dealing with domestic abuse, and I think there are some other programs as well.
And you
So it's-
don't know if there's a metric to this one where they serve so many.
believe that
in
would
this
be a
community.
hard one to, and
They might have numbers.
they might have numbers,
share
and
a
I
lot,
might
but-
have,
They're a
Yeah.
domestic abuse resource center serving Midcoast Maine is what
Yeah.
their mission on their website says.
Although I'd like to say we don't have any domestic abuse in Newcastle. I think that's a lie. I think there's probably people who use the services.
And I think they're, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a little bit of a funny one, I know, but again, I think with the precedent that it is the normal and, you know, not trying to,
The normal
Yeah.
request.
The normal
It's
request.
not an extra.
yeah, it's not an
Okay,
extra,
yeah.
not an additional. So I would just take roll call on this unless anyone else has any other comments. All those in favor of appropriating the money? All right, that's 5-0. All right, moving on to 7.4, approval of the remote meeting policy. So you want to start with that, Sarah?
So we discussed a draft of this policy at our last select board meeting. Based on the board's comments, I went through and made edits that were requested as seen by the red lines in the document. We can adopt this tonight, and if there are any further amendments, or if we want to have discussion on this document, we can pass it as amended. Peter has reviewed it, so.
Did he have any specific comments about it?
Yeah, Peter, do you want to?
Well, I did wonder why circumstances 3 and 4 were deleted. But Sarah indicated that that was the pleasure of the board. And I understand that. Otherwise, I thought it went very well with, basically the governor's kind of statements on this policy, the sort of policy, and also the state law. So I had no problem with it. We've drafted it.
Did I misremember? And I'm certainly guilty of that a lot. Did we actually say we don't ever want anyone to be able to participate if they're just out of state for some reason? I don't remember that being our conclusion. Was it?
I think we had discussion around that, but I agree. I also don't think we totally. I actually, drafted some language that we could use for basically one idea. This doesn't have to be the language we use, but so the board member is otherwise unable to attend the board meeting in person and has received approval from the board chair to be able to. I understand that the concern about we don't want someone who's attending all the meetings remotely, and I think we all
We
agree
could
on
put a
that.
limit on it, even if
Right,
it's 2 or something.
Right. Well, we also in our bylaws, we have language that says that if a member misses more than, I think it's 4 unexcused absences, then they get censured. It doesn't define what kind of criteria are okay for an excused absence, but I think so. I thought if we just, if we're concerned about it, and we just basically say that the member has to get approval from the chair, then you can do it. Because I think that, again, it's not something we want to have all the time, but if someone, whether they're out of state or just even for whatever reason can't be at the meeting, I think it's more valuable to have their participation than to have them not be part of the meeting at all.
So I guess the thing to think about, we were maybe getting into the weeds a little bit deep with it, but the other meeting, but this is again for an emergency. If there's a state of emergency.
Peter, is
fine,
that your
correct?
understanding
I mean,
that?
this is what I'm trying to understand. Are we setting this policy for, we can determine?
It does say
Well, I think-
Newcastle emergency remote
Yeah, I don't-
participation.
So I would
That
say
is
that if
different
it's an
than-
emergency situation and someone's out of state, I don't think it really matters.
But I think
Whether the
I mean,
people are out of state.
yes, the
or not.
tight. Well, I think out of state. I agree. I don't think that really matters whether you're in state or out of state. But I think, when I read it, yes, the title says emergency, but then under section 2, A is existence of an emergency. B is circumstances which physical presence is not practical. So that seems much more general.
Right.
And that's where I think it seemed reasonable to have, B, I and II are about health and illness. It seems that they would be valuable to have a clause that is
We-
more general.
Can I suggest that we just strike emergency from the title?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
remote participation.
But is that the statutory requirement to have a policy in case of emergency, or
So
it's just to have a policy?
So you should have a policy under state law for this. It doesn't have to be limited to emergencies, but the way that I read too was other times outside of an emergency where you could be,
I mean, B,
yeah, correct, where you
Yeah.
did not have to be physically present.
right.
So they are limited to health reasons. So I assume that that was what you guys had said. The two that you deleted were about basically convenience. It was like if you're traveling, I think of someone who's, well, Karen actually was the last person I think who participated.
And I just listened. I couldn't
Right,
really
correct. Yeah, you
participate,
did not vote, actually, yeah.
Right.
And so in terms of participation, I mean, what this says is unless you're physically present, you're not voting unless these things exist. But in terms of participation, it allowed for more under B, is how I read it.
Right.
So I think the issue that I think we're trying to be mindful of is that if someone did, it's hard to set certain dates, certain numbers of meetings that you can take during a term or during a year, where you're participating out of state. I think the idea is that what we're trying to, prevent is the idea that someone could be living in Florida for the winter.
Sure.
5 months out of the year or whatever. They could still have their state residency and their town residency. But the idea is that with this position that you are not only available to your constituents, but you're physically living among them.
Yeah,
and,
understood.
And aware of what's going on, not getting your information through newspapers and through hearsay or whatever. So I think that's the intent of what we're trying to say. Now, if someone happens to be traveling for work to Chicago or California and they're out of town for for a meeting, I think that's a different scenario. But again, is it the end of the world for them not to
Sure.
be physically? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
the last time we discussed this was before we were all meeting before a pandemic hit,
Right.
and we were all meeting remotely. And I think again, the form of the meeting, if everyone's meeting remotely, it's a little bit easier to control everyone's kind of on the same page as far as what they're doing. If you have one sort of floating head that's just in the middle, on a screen and they're raising their hand, it's a little bit different. I
Sure.
mean, the interaction with the meeting and everything else is tricky. So I think that's the sort of the larger question with it.
I think two things. One, I think that our bylaws would be the place to address. I mean, I think the policy here is about access. And I think limits on, where members of the board would really belong in the bylaws more than in this policy. And I think that, I mean, because like right now, it's like if you have 4 unexcused absences, you get a censure. But what does that?
Well, I think that's the problem with the bylaws, and that's what we discussed when we were talking
Right,
about.
but I think that-
unexcused absences was that,
Yeah.
was that you can say something like censure, but there's not actually a lot that we can do. So if you allow something, I think it's hard to limit. I think by allowing it, I think it's hard to put a number on it of, and what does that number really mean? And what's the difference whether I'm on business for 3 meetings or 2? I mean, what's the, where's that cutoff? I think that's the hard thing. But I think again, the precedent that we should not be moving towards is sort of the laxness in the importance of attendance physically at the meetings, if we're all physically meeting together. I think that's the only concern that I have moving forward. And if we had, where we have a 5-person select board, I think that's part of where that, I think that's part of where that goes. If I'm on vacation, man, I don't know that I really want to be
No,
sitting on the beach.
You
No,
want
it's
unexcused
adaptive.
absence.
Yeah, I want
This
Oh,
the
excuse
policies
that.
focus more on the board participation, not the community's participation. Right, so we can't confuse, what, we're allowed to do or could do to participate versus the community. Although when it talks about emergency participation or participation in emergency, I would think you would need a broader participation policy. But, right now it seems like the intent is to define what we're allowed to do.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to remember is that we can amend this policy at any time. The board can amend it, correct?
Yep.
So
Really?
I think if we find that there is an option, I think it might be prudent to, no time. Once this is a policy, it's a policy. It's not something that's approved every year annually or anything
Nope.
like that.
I
think
mean,
it could-
unless you want to insert a sunset provision.
Yeah, and maybe we shouldn't do that. Just 'cause
I would.
we're not always great at doing
Keep
everything.
You can- you
It's a
can-
lot to keep track of.
You can sunset it by vote. That's what
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And I think that, in our bylaws, it says that we are to review them annually at our first select board meeting with the new board. So I think if we also review this policy at that time, that would be a good thing. So we can make an amendment. We got to make some amendments to our bylaws anyway. So when we make amendments to our bylaws, we should make an amendment. One of the amendments should be to review this policy for any future amendments to that policy. If that makes any
Yep.
sense.
Joel, I think you're lacking confidence here in the fact that we all would be here from hell or high water.
I
every 2
just
weeks.
don't want to see, I think this guy's got his toes in the sand. He wants to get his toes in the sand. And I just want to make sure that this seat's, not empty and he's got his toes in the sand down on the beach. He's like, yeah, man,
I don't do
here."
beaches.
No,
Yeah, on the
If
water.
we got to
On
do
the water.
0 degrees tomorrow, so do you.
yeah.
Why
but
not
I-
be on the water, but not on the beach?
But I think especially with
All sandy.
the current, situation and unknowns, it's good to have a lot of latitude in this because
And we need a policy. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
so what are we amending? Now we're amending, which red line are we talking about taking out now?
I thought you
Well,
just tried
I
to
don't
talk
think
us
we
out of
were.
it.
Was that?
I thought
No,
you just tried to talk us out of
It's
it.
as presented with this strikeout for
Yeah.
3 and 4, B 3 and 4. Adds a couple words on the end of number 3.
So are we good with running with this for a year
Sure.
and seeing how it goes, and then we can plan vacations after that? Meet remotely. from out of
What's a
state?
vacation?
Was that?
I said, what's a
Yeah,
vacation?
exactly. All right, so, let me start over with that. Do I have a motion to approve the Newcastle emergency remote participation policy as presented? The red line,
So moved.
all right, moved by Tor, do I have a second? Seconded by Robin, I guess we've been discussing it, but is
Yep.
there any other further discussion?
The only thing that comes to mind is Joel, Tor's point of that it's not just emergency, and do we want to modify the title? Because it does have that section B, 2B is not addressing emergency.
I think we could review that at our next.
Okay, that's fine.
I just don't want to change too much right now.
All right, I have a question on 5C then.
Okay.
If any board member is participating from a remote location, so it could be- it's just one person perhaps, because they're sick or
Yeah.
whatever. The board shall make all non-confidential documents and other materials, electronic or otherwise, considered by it during the meeting available to the public who attend by remote means. How do we do that?
Oh, yeah.
You can post them,
Oh, yeah.
Yep, on our,
post them on the website.
post them on
Just
the
post them on the
website,
website?
the
Okay,
same way we do.
but we don't do that
Yeah.
now.
We could post the whole packet then.
But then do we have to remember that if someone's, it's
if we have
Yeah.
a
it's a
remote meeting.
different procedure than what we do now.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, why do we need to do that if we don't do it now?
That's, and if any member,
Right, if we're all participating remotely, then absolutely get, everything out there, but if we're not, if it's only one member, why does that make a difference in how we operate?
Well, I think the idea is that if one of these emergencies exists and it's enough to have some members staying home, that the public should still have access to all the stuff that that member has access to, so they can attend remotely through, Zoom or something else, or watch it on YouTube, but still have the same materials. In effect, they're saying, don't make the citizen, like, as long as everything's calm, a citizen can show up and get a policy or get an ordinance or, whatever. If it's a situation that's at least sending one person out of the board home, then let's put everything online so that everybody can read it online. I think that's the idea behind it.
I'm just want to make sure we're not making a policy here that is it's different from what we do now. So someone's gonna have to remember that if somebody's not coming in that day, that they have to now post the stuff
and
online.
we've never posted the entire packet on our website.
When you were meeting virtually, you didn't either.
I don't think we ever have in
No.
any circumstances. There's people, so Mal, you get the packet sent
Now
to
you can
you.
get a request. right?
People can,
Anyone, yep, if anyone wants the packet, it's public information.
Can
You can send it
request
to
it.
anyone that requests it. We post the agenda, but just not the supporting documentation typically.
But to
I think,
Oh, my
solve
God.
that issue of Karen's, it's just, why don't we as a general rule
post
post it
entire-
all, you know?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. That's not
Yeah,
an unusual. I'm
and I
just worried
guess-
about it being an unusual.
Yeah, yeah,
step.
Right, no, but
I think it
if
would
it's
just-
customary.
It's just administrative
Can-
time, I think is the, do you want to pay for the increased labor to do that? You're probably talking about an hour or two every week.
Yeah, it's just right, it's just a logistic issue. It means now downloading the 300-page Lincoln County Hazard Mitigation Plan
correct.
onto our website and keeping that much data stored on our site for the agenda packet. So I see where.
Well,
I-
when,
if
when,
people were
when we
really-
thought, when we thought we were going to a management software that was gonna deal with our agendas, that was gonna solve this issue, but
So
ended up not working.
I guess, again, where as it is right now, that information with the packet is available to any citizen who requests it. I think that's
We could amend it to say and approve as amended if any board member is participating from a,
well,
or
but this
if
is-
the board is participating from a remote location, the board shall make
Yes.
the agenda electronic or otherwise available to the public who attend by remote means to the same
Is it-
extent as customarily
Mhm.
available.
It says also it's customarily available to members of the
Yeah, I think-
public who attend board meetings in person. So we don't hand out packets at our board meetings. That has never been our policy. We have the documentation, we have our agenda. And we are, we do have to get back onto, some of the things that we need to work on is we have talked about trying to figure out the space in here is really strange, but the thought process with getting that television was to be able to display
Document.
the documents as we're going through them. And again, that's more if we're going through certain things. So I have no problem with putting this stuff out. I just think there's a level of confusion that can occur that I'm trying to avoid. Because if someone sees something and they see it on the town website and it's something we're discussing, it can easily be just believed that, oh, that's a town policy, and it can get kind of confusing.
Well, how about-
Whereas I think we're fine with it as long as we post the agenda.
Which does get posted.
And then anyone who wants the packet can request it.
Yeah.
And I
Fine.
think maybe even just adding that line to the on the website where you can find the agenda.
I'm just curious why 5C doesn't say that the board member who participates remotely receives all the agenda packet as they normally would. I mean, it seems almost convoluted that they reference the same documents that the public receives. But
Yeah.
I mean, that even suggests they get less than what they
Right.
normally would have
Well, you-
anyways.
You're gonna get it by email anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think 5C maybe goes a little bit too far or is a little bit too wordy to,
It might be ambiguous.
Uh-oh. Is
it's
it
probably
legal?
not illegal, but.
Is it ambiguous?
But I think Sarah's right. How about if it's just if the board is meeting remotely, then we'll make sure that we post,
If the member.
not
You know,
not if one
no.
member, if the whole board is.
Yeah. I don't understand it.
If the board
Any
is meeting
member.
remotely, then we'll make sure that the agenda is available.
Which we,
We do anyway.
Try
and do
So just
anyway.
cross, maybe
Just
C just
cross
goes
it out.
away.
Okay. Because nothing changes.
Right.
Okay. If that's
Right.
what the board,
So you're gonna strike C?
Yeah,
So
think
it
that
makes
makes
sense.
sense.
it would
Yep.
be approved as amended.
pending legal review, is it okay to strike C? Let's just strike C. So we need to start over.
No, no.
Do I have a motion to approve?
You have to withdraw the prior one that
Oh,
was
yeah.
seconded.
That's true.
Withdraw.
Withdraw your
My second.
motion. You would-
I'll just, I'll just amend my motion
Yeah, why don't you do
to-
that?
to approve the what do we call this? Newcastle Emergency Remote Participation Policy. With the amendment to strike item C. item
Okay. Do I have a
I'll
second
renew-
for
I'll
that?
renew my second.
Second that. All right. Any other further discussion? It's a good catch. All right, all those in favor? Passes 5-0. All right. So did you have anything you wanted to, any town manager report?
I don't have
Nothing to report.
any updates other than we're closed for MLK Day on Monday.
Oh, okay.
And good job getting the word out about the closure on Friday with the storm.
Yeah,
I think that came out early enough that people should have been well aware and would have driven in.
It's pretty bad out.
Yeah.
I drove out in it, but I'm nutty, so.
We didn't get as much snow as predicted, but there were cars off the road.
Yeah, it was
in a
greasy.
bunch
It
of
was greasy,
places.
greasy.
Well, we
stuff.
have to
Super greasy.
consider our staff
Yeah.
come in from towns
Yeah.
outside of Newcastle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to 8.1, we have a town warrant for $21,607.61. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Rob, seconded by Karen. All right, any discussion on the warrant?
Straightforward.
See anything? It's jumped out at me. All right, all those in favor of approving the budget? Or the warrant?
warrant.
Warrant.
All right, passes 5-0. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Moved by Karen, do I have a second, seconded by Rob. All those in favor? All right,
Okay.
passes. Oh, Tor, do
Oh, I'm sorry.
you want to adjourn? Yeah, passes 5-0. All right,
Excellent.
8:15.
Wow.